Hello you over 260,000 members of the Brohirrim and all of you who haven't hit the subscribe button yet. Today we're delving into one of the most iconic locations in all of Middle-earth, Helm's Deep.
Build me an army worthy of Gondor.
Men of that land called it Helm's Deep, after a hero of old wars who had made his refuge there. Ever steeper and narrower it wound inward from the north under the shadow of the Trilogy, till the crow-haunted cliffs rose like mighty towers on either side, shutting out the light. At Helm's Gate, before the mouth of the deep, there was a heel of rock thrust outward by the northern cliff. There upon its spur stood high walls of ancient stone, and within them was a lofty tower. Men said that in far-off days of the glory of Gondor, the Sea Kings had built here this fastness with the hands of giants. The Hornburg it was called, for a trumpet sounded upon the tower echoed in the deep behind, as if armies long forgotten were issuing to war from caves beneath the hills. A wall, too, the men of old had made from the Hornburg to the southern cliff, barring the entrance to the gorge. Beneath it by a wide culvert the deeping stream passed out. About the feet of the horn rock it wound, and flowed then in a gully through the midst of a wide green gore, sloping gently down from Helm's Gate to Helm's Dyke. Thence it fell into the deeping coombe, and out into the Westfold Vale. Helm's Deep, also known as the Hornburg, is a large valley located below the Trilogy at the end of the northernmost arm of the White Mountains. This deep gorge, situated on the far side of the Westfold Vale, has a history that stretches back to the early days of the Third Age, when it was first fortified by the men of Gondor. Because it is in fact the Númenóreans where the knowledge comes from, as they were renowned for their advanced engineering and deep understanding of Middle-earth's landscapes. So, although an exact construction date is not known, it is said to have been back in the times of the early days of Gondor, when the Númenóreans were still strong. And with that, they constructed this stronghold and named it Aglarond, meaning glittering caves in Sindarin. The name reflects the awe-inspiring glittering caves that lie within the cliffs of the gorge, caves that were likely explored and named by these early Gondorian settlers who saw in them not just natural beauty, but a potential haven and resource in times of war. In 2510 of the Third Age, the steward Cirion of Gondor granted the province of Calenardon to King Eorl of the Eorl as a reward for their aid in defeating the Balcoth. With this, the fortress was transferred to the Rohirrim. This exchange marked a significant cultural blending between Gondor and Rohan. Initially, the fortress was named Soothburg in their own language of Rohanese. However, after the war against the Dunlendings and Hammerhand's death, the gorge was renamed to Helm's Deep, with the fortification itself being named the Hornburg. The defences of Helm's Deep were formidable. The deeping wall, a massive stone structure that spanned the entrance to the gorge, was nearly impregnable, while the Hornburg stood sentinel on a high spur of rock, offering a commanding view of the surrounding area. Below the deeping wall lay Helm's Dyke, a high earthen rampart that served as an additional line of defence. The deeping stream flowed through the gorge, passing under the wall through a culvert and then along the feet of the Hornburg, providing a natural barrier that further strengthened the fortress's defences. This combination of natural geography and Númenórean craftsmanship made Helm's Deep a key defensive position in Rohan, a stronghold that would prove its worth time and again in the history of Middle-earth. One of the most legendary figures in the history of Rohan and Helm's Deep is of course Helm Hammerhand, whose tale is inseparable from the valley that now bears his name. Helm ascended to the throne as the 9th king of Rohan in 2741 of the Third Age. His reign was turbulent, marked by ongoing conflict with the Dunlendings, a people who had long harboured enmity towards the Rohirrim. This hostility was rooted in deep-seated grievances, as the Dunlendings had been displaced from their lands when the Rohirrim settled in Rohan. The most defining moment of Helm's reign came in 2758, when a formidable coalition of Dunlendings, led by a man named Wulf, launched a devastating assault on Rohan. This invasion was particularly catastrophic as it coincided with the onset of the Long Winter, a period of severe cold and snow that gripped the land from the years 2758 to 2759. The Long Winter was one of the harshest in the histories of Middle-earth, bringing widespread famine and death. As the forces of Rohan were overwhelmed by the Dunlendings, Helm and his remaining people were forced to retreat to the safety of Helm's Deep. The fortress, with its impregnable defences, became their last refuge during this bleak time. Here they endured a prolonged and grueling siege, cut off from the rest of Rohan and surrounded by enemies. Helm Hammerhand's resolve in the face of adversity became the stuff of legend. It is said that, during the long nights of winter, Helm would don a white cloak, blending in with the snow, and venture out alone to launch surprise attacks on the besieging forces. Such was his ferocity that it was rumoured he killed many of his enemies with his bare hands, and his ghostly figure in the snow struck fear into the hearts of the Dunlendings. Over time, Helm's solitary nighttime forays became the stuff of local myth, and the very sound of his warhorn was said to cause terror amongst his foes. Tragically, the siege took a heavy toll on Helm's family. Both his sons, Haleth and Hammer, were killed during the long winter, and the hardship of the siege eventually claimed Helm's life as well in the winter of 2759. According to legend, Helm was found frozen in a standing position, his countenance still fierce and unyielding, as if death itself could not conquer his almighty spirit. Helm's bravery and the resilience of his people became legendary in the annals of Rohan. After his death, the valley where he made his final stand was named Helm's Deep, in his honour of course, and the fortress was called the Hornburg, a name that would be forever associated with Helm's last battle. The tale of Helm Hammerhand, his tragic end, and his heroic resistance during the long winter were passed down through generations, becoming a central part of Rohan's cultural heritage and identity. Helm's Deep's strategic importance in the history of Rohan and Middle-earth as a whole can really not be overstated. Nestled at the end of the Deeping Coombe, a deep and narrow gorge beneath the towering peaks of the Thryhern, Helm's Deep was ideally situated to serve as a natural fortress. Its location, combined with the formidable man-made defences, made it one of the most secure strongholds in Rohan, and indeed in all of Middle-earth. The entrance to the gorge was guarded by the Deeping Wall, a massive stone barrier that stretched across the width of the valley. This wall was nearly impregnable, built with the engineering skill inherited from the Númenórean ancestors of Gondor. The wall's height and thickness were designed to repel large armies, and it had only one vulnerable point, a small culvert through which the Deeping stream flowed. This stream provided a continuous supply of fresh water to the defenders, an essential resource during prolonged sieges. Perched on the high spur of rock above the entrance to the gorge was the Hornburg, the central keep of the fortress. From this vantage point, the defenders could survey the entire Deeping Coombe and the plains beyond, giving them early warning of any approaching enemy forces. The Hornburg itself was a bastion of last resort, with walls that were thick and strong enough to withstand even the most determined assaults. Its tower, from which the great horn of Helm Hammerhand was sounded, became a symbol of Rohan's defiance and resilience. Within the cliffs of the gorge lay the glittering caves, also known as Aglarond as we said earlier. These caves were renowned for their beauty and rich mineral deposits, and this held strategic importance beyond their aesthetic appeal. During times of siege, they provided a secure place for the storage of supplies and a refuge for non-combatants. The caves could shelter large numbers of people, ensuring that the population could survive even if the outer defences were breached. Helm's Deep was more than just a military fortress. It was a symbol of that hope and endurance that the people of Rohan could cling on to. Throughout the Third Age, whenever Rohan faced external threats from Dunlending invasions or the looming shadow of Saruman, Helm's Deep stood as that symbol of safety. The fortress represented a way they could overcome any odds. But as well, there is more than just its physical defences. It served as a rallying point for the Rohirrim, a place where they could regroup and mount counterattacks. Its location near the borders of Rohan also made it a critical point for defending the kingdom against incursions from the west and south. As the War of the Ring loomed on the horizon, Helm's Deep's significance became ever more apparent. The fortress would soon be the site of one of the most pivotal battles in the history of Middle-earth, a battle that would test the mettle of the Rohirrim and determine the fate of Rohan. The most famous and pivotal event in the history of Helm's Deep is undoubtedly the Battle of Helm's Deep, also known as the Battle of the Hornburg. This epic conflict occurred during the War of the Ring on the night of March 3rd, 3019 of the Third Age, and it stands as one of the most significant battles in the struggle against Sauron's forces, or Saruman's in this case. Saruman, once a wise and respected wizard, had fallen under the corrupting influence of Sauron and sought to subjugate Rohan as part of his broader plan to dominate Middle-earth himself. To achieve this, Saruman amassed an army of fighting Uruk-hai, specially bred, larger and more disciplined than regular orcs, as well as Dunlendings and other foul creatures. His goal was to crush Rohan, sever the kingdom's ability to resist, and ultimately clear the path for Sauron's dominion. Realizing the peril, Theoden, king of Rohan at this time, made the decision to lead his people to the stronghold of Helm's Deep. The fortress was their last hope, a place where they could make a stand against the overwhelming forces raised against them. The battle began under the cover of darkness, as Saruman's forces approached the fortress in a storm, adding to the atmosphere of dread. The defenders of Helm's Deep were vastly outnumbered, with the estimates placing the numbers of Uruk-hai alone at over 10,000, while the defenders were nowhere near this, maybe around 1,000 or just more, or potentially only in the hundreds. The Uruk-hai, heavily armed and disciplined, launched wave after wave of assaults against the Deeping Wall, using ladders, battering rams, and even siege engines. Saruman had also equipped his forces with a devastating new weapon, explosive devices, likely a form of black powder which they used to breach the Deeping Wall. The explosion created a gap in the defences, allowing the enemy to pour into the fortress. Despite this, the defenders, led by Aragorn and Eomer, fought valiantly, retreating to the Hornburg and continuing the defence from within the keep. As the battle raged on, Theoden and his men found themselves in a desperate situation, seemingly on the brink of defeat. But, in the darkest hour, as the first light of dawn broke on March 4th, hope arrived in the form of Gandalf the White. Gandalf had left earlier to seek reinforcements and now returned with Erkenbrand, the Lord of the Westfold, and a contingent of men of Rohan. With a great cry, they charged down upon the Uruk-hai, catching them between the hammer of the riders and the anvil of the defenders within Helm's Deep. Along with this, the arrival of the Huorns, the sentinel and vengeful trees from Fangorn Forest, further sealed the fate of Saruman's army. As the Uruk-hai attempted to flee, the Huorns closed in, cutting off their escape and ensuring their complete destruction. The surviving Dunlendings, seeing the tide turn, surrendered and were spared by the Rohirrim, who, in fact, showed them mercy. After the battle, the fallen Uruk-hai were buried in a great mound known as the Death Down, a grim reminder of the cost of war. The Dunlendings were buried in a separate mound below Helm's Dyke, reflecting the respect given to them despite their enmity. The victory of Helm's Deep was not just a tactical success, it was a turning point in the War of the Ring. It demonstrated the spirit and bravery of the Rohirrim, and it marked the beginning of the end of Saruman's ambitions. The battle also solidified Helm's Deep's place in the annals of Middle-earth, forever enshrining it as a symbol of hope, resilience, and the unyielding fight against the forces of darkness. The legacy of Helm's Deep is deeply intertwined with the history of Rohan, but its significance extends far beyond the events of the Third Age. After the decisive victory in the Battle of Helm's Deep, the fortress continued to play a crucial role as the War of the Ring drew to a close and into the Fourth Age. Following the defeat of Sauron and the destruction of the One Ring, Helm's Deep returned to its role as a key defensive stronghold for the Kingdom of Rohan. The immediate aftermath of the war saw Rohan rebuilding and fortifying its borders, and Helm's Deep was no exception. King Eomer, who succeeded Theoden as King of Rohan, prioritised the restoration and enhancement of Rohan's fortresses, ensuring that Helm's Deep would remain an impenetrable bastion against any future threats. Under the reign of the newly crowned King of Gondor and Arnor, Aragorn, efforts were made to maintain and strengthen the alliance between Rohan and Gondor. As a part of these efforts, Aragorn likely supported Eomer in fortifying Rohan's defences, including that restoration of Helm's Deep. This collaboration between the two kingdoms ensured that the Hornburg and the Deeping Wall were not only repaired, but also improved to withstand the challenges of the New Age. While Middle-earth entered a time of relative peace during the Fourth Age, the memory of the battles fought at Helm's Deep served as a reminder of the cost of that peace. The fortress stood as that symbol of vigilance, ever ready to defend the people of Rohan against any who might threaten their hard-won freedom. As we have touched upon a bit already, the legacy of Helm's Deep goes beyond just its physical structure. Those stories of Helm Hammerhand and the Long Winter, the heroic defences against Saruman's forces, became stuff of legend, passed down from generation to generation. It shows how it became more than just a stronghold, it became a cultural symbol, really embodying the spirit of the Rohirrim. The name Helm's Deep came to represent the strength and resilience of Rohan itself. But we must remember, it was potentially not just the stone walls that attracted people in future times too. The glittering caves were still there with their unmatched beauty. In fact, Legolas and Gimli had gone back to visit them after the War of the Ring as well. So it shows that these may have too drawn visitors from all corners of the reunited kingdom, further adding to the legacy of this remarkable place. And of course it would be wrong to do a video on Helm's Deep and not mention the epic battle that was brought to life in Peter Jackson's film adaptations. It really has become one of the most iconic and celebrated moments in potentially all of cinema. There is a very strong debate that this is the greatest battle scene ever shown on screen. The imagery of the fortress, the battle, and the resilience of its defenders continues to resonate with audiences, and something that still holds up to this day. Yes, there will always be debate on should the elves really have been there, but that is not one for today. And just before we draw to a close, I think it is also worth noting that Christopher Tolkien, J.R. Tolkien's son and the editor of many of his works, acknowledges that there were challenges to fully capturing Helm's Deep exact location on the maps of Middle-earth. So although we have a very strong idea of where it may be, Christopher Tolkien is not entirely sure he even got this right. But despite these challenges, the significance of Helm's Deep in the lore is certainly unquestionable. Its story, both in the context of the War of the Ring and the legacy it left behind, remains a cornerstone of Tolkien's world. And so there we have it. The complete history of Helm's Deep shows how this iconic fortress has stood the test of time, both as a formidable stronghold and as a representation of the courage and resilience of the Rohirrim. From its origins as a Númenórean fortress, through the legendary deeds of Helm Hammerhand to the pivotal battle of the Hornburg during the War of the Ring, this location really became a centre pillar of Rohan's history. Even after the War of the Ring, Helm's Deep continued to play a vital role in the kingdom's defences, with its legacy living on through tales and traditions of its people. Today, it stands not only as a testament to the bravery and determination of those who defended it, but also as one of the most cherished and enduring elements of Tolkien's Middle-earth. And I would also like to take a moment at the end of this video today to give you a quick update on The Guard, the short film that we are creating. Everything is going amazing. We have just shot block 2 and the rest of it should hopefully be shot soon too. As always, it is all the money from our Patreon that is funding this. In essence, it is a no budget production if you consider the large scale of film, but every pound that you give is a massive help to create an incredible story. I'm putting a couple of shots on screen now and some behind the scenes clips to kind of give you an idea of what's going on. So if you would like to help support it a little bit more to help push us over the line, then please check out our Patreon. Every little bit really helps. And with that, it is now time for my question of the day, which is, what other locations would you like to see me cover like I have done this one? Let me know all of your thoughts and opinions on this in the comment section down below. And now it is time to give a massive thank you to our patrons who continue to support the channel. You are all amazing. And if you have reached the very end of this video with me today and you haven't subscribed to the channel, please consider doing so. It would massively help us out. And why not drop a like on the video as well? And with that, all I can say is, thank you for spending just some of your time with me today, and I will see you next time on The Broken Sword.
Is this it? Is this all you can conjure, Saruman?